Zostałem przydzielony do sesji nowości i o kilku nowościach powiem, ale o większości nowości to przejął na siebie Łukasz Wróbel, więc tutaj już trudno po nim cokolwiek powtórzyć fajnego. Będę mówił o pewnych rzeczach, o wielu rzeczach, które dla części z Państwa będą pewnie oczywiste. Natomiast nie tyle pokażę owszem nowości, natomiast powiem również o tym, jak czasami przygotować się do wdrożeń B2B, jakie elementy warto rozważyć.
Which elements you should take into account, and I have to reiterate that it is worth meeting, that IT and businesses should meet to develop B2B scenarios, because these B2B scenarios are concerned that is, IT departments are concerned with developing B2B scenarios, but when you implement these scenarios, you change a concept according to which we publish a particular scenario or solution. Well, I'm going to show you several such solutions which are in use in versions 2016, 2017 and are going to be extended with new possibilities in version 2019. The first point, which is called before we start executing the project, this is the list of points that you should take into consideration before you start saying that, before you say that you have published a process. So then we're going to talk about authentication, publication, new things in the version WEBCON BPS 2019. So I'm going to show you this, and you're going to think about which methods are most suitable to you and the easiest to use. What does it mean to use WEBCON BPS in B2B? As we designed BPS many years ago, we started with SharePoint. SharePoint was developed as an intranet solution. We didn't think about B2B scenarios at the time. We designed it as an enclosed system for a particular company. So we didn't think about the possibility to grant access to external parties to the system. But we didn't share this particular assumption with you. We didn't tell you that this platform is not open to external users. You didn't ask us if it's possible or not to grant access, but you published it anyway, and I was one of those people who actually did that too. Because I was working at an IT department in a company that used WEBCON BPS, and we granted access to WEBCON BPS to external parties, to our business partners. And some people started to ask me, but this is impossible, started to tell me this is impossible, you know. So that's why we should discuss this particular topic at the beginning. That's my responsibility to talk about this. Now, I was told to do this because I was responsible for technology. I was told we're not going to change BPS, but we're going to publish it. And we've managed to do so. So, if are there any people who have B2B scenarios in the room? I thought there might be more people, in fact. Well, B2B as such is all about this. B2B scenarios. There are lots of such scenarios. I'm going to ask you at the end of the session how many of you are using this kind of scenarios. I'm going to ask this question at the end of the session. Just to make things simple, these scenarios, not only people from your company are involved in the scenario, but also external parties such as outsourcing companies, for example your accountants, also your IT partners. There are lots of processes involved in B2B standards, so this might be IT process outsourcing, but first, before we started outsourcing IT, that we did logistics. So IT outsourcing is using help desk processes which uses WEBCON BPS. We also use processes that monitor or manage any kind of logistic services. This might be parcels, it might be some kind of complaints. So there are several parties involved: your company, an external provider, an external logistic provider. So this is a kind of scenario in which you use B2B scenarios. Sometimes it's an external party that starts the process. Sometimes we may start the process, we send the purchase request, and then our suppliers send us an offer or provide a solution and join the tender. So these are different models. The BPS system in the B2B scenario, this is also our WEBCON support. This is a BPS used in a typical B2B scenario. We provide the solution as WEBCON, and you send the request to provide the service as our clients. And we have been using this kind of solutions for several years now. Now, before you choose a particular technology, and before I tell you more about particular solutions, let me reiterate this: we should meet. Business and IT should meet. Hopefully, your companies treat these two areas as one, so that they do not work in silos. Now, considering how many implementation processes we took part in, and in how many implementation processes had to be reverted because our clients were unhappy, because it was difficult to log in, because it was too expensive to maintain the entire process. So my first request is, please do meet with business, with your business areas, so that your people tell you how you want to use WEBCON BPS, whether you need a server with processes or just one element for your client. So I marked it in red so that you remember it better. There's another element which is also related to our business approach. That is the way we authenticate users outside of the organization. As I spoke to our clients, and we spoke about the ways we publish BPS and B2B scenarios, you usually ask about proxy or firewalls. I usually start with authentication, because we tried to do it in 2 or 3 goes with most of our clients. Most of you who work at IT departments, you don't want to work in the local Active Directory. You would prefer that you use some external login sites. And we did several implementations, and each of these implementation processes had to be changed. And we gave up on some of the elements, and that was because the users who used our system, for a variety of reasons, and that was completely beyond their grasp as people from IT, they didn't want to use their Gmail accounts for their professional purposes, and they used their Gmail accounts only to authenticate their use. One thing that was beyond our grasp, which was completely abstract to us, it turned out that not all of the people from the company we worked with had a Gmail account. And it also turned out that it is too difficult for them to set up a Gmail account so that they could authenticate their access with their Gmail accounts. And the whole process could turn out to be unsuccessful just because of such a simple thing that is authentication. And so this is something that many of you don't want to use, and some people from IT don't want to use it either. That is, we had to start with our own AD, and we had to develop accounts in Active Directory. So these are the next thing is the way you publish the system. So this is the low-level system of your activity, the activity of your IT system. This might be BPS or the publication of any other application. The approach remains the same. And the final thing, which many of you forget about, there is a difference between authentication and authorization. So when you authenticate, you want to identify the user. These people do not have access to the system. Now, authorization is where you manage access to your system. If it's SharePoint, this is access to portals. If it's BPS, this is access to the elements within the portal. And this is yet another area in which IT and businesses have to meet. These topics need the engagement of both parties. And again, this is something that IT should do. That is, IT should carry out the audits to verify the solutions. Now, when you think about the audits, you usually hire a hacker, or what you nicely call a security specialist, and these guys are there to show whether the system is foolproof. But these audits are there to check whether the users have access to particular areas. If their access is not too wide, so we have granted access to people to enter the system, and we have to check whether their access is not too broad, too wide. For example, you have a user whose account may not be disabled, so we have to carry out an audit. And sometimes some employees are laid off, and it's your task to find out whether they have still access to the system. This point is critical to the entire system. It's not so much about authentication or publication, but the management of access to the system and to the elements that users have access to within the system. Now, one more thing that has a bearing on the authentication and publication. Now, this is the way we define the number of parties that are involved in the process. If it's B2B, involving 2 parties or 3 parties or 4 parties or 5 parties. Now, sometimes it's not only B2B, sometimes it's also B2C. So you have a large number of clients who have to authenticate in the system. So they have to have the name in the system, but when you start the process or the project, you don't really know how many users there are going to be. So let me go back to the scenario in which you collect content in which a multimedia company collects content in the BPS system, and at the beginning this company doesn't know whether they are going to work with 100 users or 1,000 or 10,000 users, and they are obviously hopeful to get as many users as possible. The same goes for the type of user. That is, these might be companies, these might be departments, these might be individual clients. Sometimes you may also take another thing into consideration, that is how detailed these privileges might be. So imagine that you work in a B2B mode. Well, I don't want to judge this, but it seems to me that either as IT departments or companies, we say that a particular company is my contracting party and we give them a login called company B, and I'm not giving them logins for every single employee in this company. If this is your B2B scenario and it helps you do your business and it's compliant with your security policy, this is a simple and nice scenario. But again, if you provide a simple and single login to your processes, which may be used by a number of people, you lose control of the people who have access to your processes, and this is worth discussing before you start the process. The number of processes, the number of applications made available for the system, this is important too. Whether they are going to take part in one particular process that is dedicated to B2B clients, or whether this is an integral part of our business processes, our processes developed for one particular company. This also has a bearing on the solution that we choose for a company, whether they choose another thing is whether they take part in one particular element, one particular step, or other way around, whether it's we are the clients and the system is provided to us and we only start the element, or we are served by a particular company. Let me start with authentication of your users. A lot has changed in 2019, WEBCON BPS 2019. The way you authenticate should be defined by business analysis, and that means that you sometimes have to go back to square one in the project. For a long time we have used the local Active Directory, and it's still the case. This is what we do, this is a basic element for our system. But again, as clients, you started doing B2B scenarios. So you started working as part of larger networks. So we had to open new networks, new ports. Another element which is marked in green and which I would suggest that you use is ADFS, a service that is available in Windows Server. Sometimes it's not configured, but it's a package in your license. The configuration is not difficult, and this is a tool and service that has been designed to serve B2B scenarios, so that external users can log into our system with their credentials, with their login, with their password that they have in their domain. And again, going back to what I've said at the very beginning, some of the users didn't want to use their private Gmail logins, but they may just as well use their company logins. So if you refuse to use your Gmail login, you can use the login you use in your company. Yet another thing is WEBCON BPS off. So this is the broker of authentication. So the portal, our external service in the cloud, grants access to the SharePoint, to BPS, to people who use LinkedIn Live ID, Azure Active Directory accounts. So just recently we were able to provide access through Azure Active Directory. Now you can also work with providers of authentication which are configured in the SharePoint. So these might be Oracle systems. If it's been configured in the SharePoint, now you can also authenticate your users in BPS. This was already there in version 2017, but a new thing is Azure ADFS, which gives a possibility to use to grant access to BPS to native users of Office 365. This may sound like advertising Microsoft, but this solution gives suitable and easy to use authentication solutions to external parties. Now you can send an invite to an Office 365 user, and it all works really nicely. You can also use a variety of features such as groups.
What do I recommend? First of all, I recommend ADFS. If you have it configured, you can use it. If not, have a think about it. If you ever want to publish anything, not necessarily BPS, could be SharePoint as well. We can create also a logging screen. It's not 100% configurable, but you can have a separate screen for employees of WEBCON and WEBCON partners. So I can say to the user, click here and you can log in. And what they are going to use, well, depends on ADFS. They might be using our local Active Directory, but covered by ADFS. Or maybe they are using their own account from their own domain or from Office 365. So if you haven't used, but you would like to start B2B scenarios, think about ADFS. Option number 2, WEBCON BPS 2019, is adding providers, Azure Active Directory, directly to BPS. So Łukasz hasn't shown this screen, but this is a screen that allows you to add different logging providers directly to BPS portal. You can have more buttons here. So we can create this ADFS at the level of BPS. I think if it's published in a native portal, it would be nice. We have to log into SharePoint independently. So this is a new thing. I also added here on the bottom of the slide that it's worth looking at what Microsoft is doing, especially if you have a hybrid installation or you're moving to that direction and Office 365. I think it could be of much help. Once you select your authentication method, there is the second part. Well, sometimes the security departments or security policies block it, but it is a means of publishing the application externally. Prior to the version of 2019, very often we came across a situation that, okay, we can publish BPS, but never SharePoint. So there will be a change here, because we can now publish externally BPS only, the portal only. If for any reasons the security departments don't want to publish SharePoint, you can try and convince them that we could use this alternative and publish BPS portal and not SharePoint. Publication options. I know that the title of this slide might sound a little ambiguous, publishing everything for everyone. It's not that we are giving any user from all around the world access to our BPS. No, but it is the simplest model of integration or of making things available, where we publish BPS portal on the and on the firewall, on the public internet. So this is the most common scenario. Sometimes we talk about security and that it is unsafe, but usually our clients decide to do it because it's quick and easy to implement. You can start working on it very quickly. And often this is the most important part of security. If business is working, that means security is also working. If security blocks business, this is not a good thing. So a method that's used often, we have several customers who first, smirked when they saw that, and then when they saw what kind of firewalls they have, then it turned out that this image, even though the image is easy, then it does provide big security, because it's not an old firewall that was less dependable. Firewalls can do much more now. The second method is a typical B2B. So first we create a VPN channel between the external company and our own servers, and within this VPN channel we publish BPS, SharePoint, anything else you want. It is definitely a safe method. We don't publish anything on the public internet. I told you it's worth talking to business first, because this method depends on how many partner companies we have. Here on this image you have 2 companies externally working, and this is fine. I don't know what is the limit of making it more difficult. As WEBCON, we work the other way around. We have a lot of channels open side to side to you. So in the morning I saw we have 44 channels to different companies, so it is not as difficult to support it. It is possible to do it for multiple external companies. So as I said, it's not available on the public internet. You can easily monitor traffic between those channels. Of course, you need to do a lot of configuration and maintenance or support, so that takes a little longer for this solution to be provided, because both parties need to agree on the channel, on its parameters. Sometimes it takes a day, sometimes it takes 6 months. So we need to remember about it. We can use the first method. So if we have a VPN channel, we can give the trust between the client domains. But I think ADFS in this case would also be just more convenient and more comfortable. Another solution, one customer said I should suggest this solution to everyone, because then we sell more server licenses. So we have a dedicated BPS in DMZ, so instead of 1 BPS we have 2. Well, this idea with licenses, I didn't even cross my mind. That was a customer that thought about it, but there are some customers who implemented that solutions in different ways. Sometimes this extra BPS that is completely independent. So we have a so-called, technical directory with the SharePoint, SQL, the entire environment, and both sides, so my local user and the external user, are clients of those servers. We can say all entities that are using the server are treated as external entities. They log in differently. You can have also ADFS or other solutions, but it's completely separated from the internal LAN network, and often this is a prerequisite if you want to provide it or publish it to external parties. At this point, the DMZ, the separated servers, in 80% of implementations are installed on Azure, so they're physically sort of outsourced or installed somewhere on external servers. That of course means we have more expenses, because we have 2 environments to support. Sometimes it requires more work from the users, because they have to work on external and internal environments. You can of course cover it using presentation layout or the site layout, etc. But If the two servers are working separately and we have separate business processes, this could work as a good solution. Yet another solution I wanted to present and recommend, I think, is the use of reverse proxy. Also with the Azure application proxy offered by Microsoft. In this solution, the first contact with public internet is taken over by an external solution that channels and covers the information and transfers it to our servers. There are a lot of solutions on the market. I mentioned some of them that I had some experience. I'm, a bit sentimental about Microsoft TMG. Unfortunately, Microsoft said they are phasing it out, but it was a tool that was safe and easy, a very good way of publishing SharePoint to the public, and by this also publishing BPN. Unfortunately, this solution is no longer available. Now the majority of our versions are on the NGIX open source version, not even the enterprise paid one, and that works. And of course, the reverse proxy is the server that takes over the entire load. It takes all the queries from the world, and if our servers are attacked, for example DDoS, then the proxy might stop working. But internally, within company, BPS will still work. We are not going to block our in-company work. And also, if we have the server provider that is external, they are the most effective in defeating attacks, DDoS. In WEBCON, for example, if somebody decided to use DDoS for WEBCON, I just plug it out from the wall, because that's the only method for me. But this is one of the safest methods of publishing any application, especially BPS. And coming back to Microsoft again, I would also recommend reverse proxy that was transferred to the cloud by Microsoft, so AD application proxy. I didn't translate this because it is prepared by Microsoft, so it means you don't need to change or update your applications to work with application proxy. Sounds good, but it was not true. We had to do a lot of work in BPS to make it work with Azure application proxy. I don't know if we have our representative from Holland. They did an implementation, and it was a pain, to be honest with you, especially the sentence that says you don't need to change or update applications. No, that wasn't the case. We had to do a lot of changes so that to make it work. But yes, this solution is quite convenient because, first of all the potential attacks are taken over by Microsoft. I believe they have infrastructure to be able to defend against such attacks. They also have possibility to define access, not only via IP users or groups, but also by geographical regions, towns and cities. There are so many access rules that it is very interesting. It again sounds as I'm advertising Microsoft, but it is something that I would recommend, especially if you already have hybrid solutions. If you are in the cloud to some extent, then have a think about this application, this solution. And finally, the final option, this requires a little bit of programming work. We are now doing some implementation where BPS is a backend that is hidden far away, for example, like very deeply hidden from the public, but we have external program written in a separate tool, not related to BPS, and it is protected by the first firewall against the world, and then we have a second firewall through which it connects to the web portal. So the security rules in this company do not allow any application from DMZ to connect directly with anything further. So we have a extra web application that connects with a simple portal database and then connects with BPS data where different processes take place. As far as I know, this is even more complicated now. There is reverse proxy on top of that, so this installation is quite complex, but it is a possible scenario when an external access is sort of covered by an application. I told you it's the last option, but that's not true. There's the final option that I like most in BPS when it comes to publications of B2B or B2C scenarios. Have you used Hot Mailbox? Who uses Hot Mailbox? Okay, there is quite a few people. Internally, in WEBCON, we use hot mailboxes as a means of working with you, B2B and B2C. If you go to our website, for example, where we publish the free Starter Express version, there is a form, simple form, there is no underlying logic. The only thing that this form does is sends us an email to Hot Mailbox. We receive an email where the fields from this form are just separated by a hash. We get it, the Hot Mailbox starts a process. This is exactly the process. Most of it has failed, or at least the final steps are not positive or not successful, but a workflow is launched that processes this information, and the person who, for example, ordered a license for Starter Express version gets also via BPS an email with login and password to our system, to Starter. This is a completely automated process. Nobody is looking at it, and it is a scenario that is more B2C because we don't know how many customers are going to be there. Everyone can log in, anyone can log in, and anyone can get login information. So I wonder, maybe you should think whether this scenario could work for you. You know, for years I've been also working with security, so somebody could say, well, for security is a problem because SMTP is always accessible, so we don't have to ask security, so we can kind of, bypass them. We should ask them, but we don't have to. We can have the Hotmail. Nobody's going to block SMTP. Of course, it's worth going to IT so that they do something that we only accept messages only from this form and not from some spam sources. But I like this scenario personally because it is very nice functionality for our CRM, and it's not only about sending a license, because once we sort of catch this customer within our CRM machine, then we're not gonna let go. So if you downloaded the Starter license, which is free, then we sort of start the counter and we are waiting for the order to come in. So these are possible scenarios. And how BPS 2019 could help us in B2B scenarios. First of all, we have a BPS portal. You've been hearing about it all the time for the last 2 days, BPS portal, etc. But secondly, we have new web parts. We call them modern web parts that can be embedded in Office 365 or other SharePoints. Thirdly, Łukasz used my example yesterday, which are the embed codes. We can embed elements of our system in a variety of places. Then we have the new sources of user synchronization and authentication, provider definition authentication within BPS, so this will be manageable from the level of the studio.
Pierwsze, co on nam daje?
Now, speaking of what benefits WEBCON BPS portals gives us. Now, what it does give is that we can publish BPS portal or some elements in BPS portal. So we don't have to do any hardwaring for the SharePoint. And again, we may use Office 365 to register it as a registered application in Office 365, and you can launch it from Office 365. You can do it through Azure Application Proxy. Well, I don't want you to get me wrong. You might think that SharePoint might be not secure enough. 85% of the elements that were reported to us by auditors, external auditors, were concerned with the configuration of HTTPS protocol, as we didn't switched off old protocols, but the most time-consuming thing was to turn off the feature which was driven into the SharePoint, that is turning off access to the SharePoints pickers with descriptions of particular positions in companies, because now that we have entered the GDPR era, this is the greatest threat to the company, because some of the external users, some of the external parties or contractors may be able to see too much. But the SharePoint is, after all, to see the profile of a colleague, what they are working on, and most of the work that we've done during publishing the SharePoint was to turn off some of the features in the SharePoint, the features that were available to the external parties. So now the web portal helps us in this respect, that we do not have to publish the SharePoint. Now there is one more element which I'm going to show you live, something different that Łukasz presented to you. These are modern web parts which gave you the possibility to embed web parts in Office 365 or potentially in a SharePoint of a different company. This doesn't have to be Office 365, it might be Office on-prem, and you can make a deal with the company to install components that come from a system. But previously, before you do this, now you have to deal with authentication and publication. You have to choose a suitable and safe method to do so, but you can arrange these elements in a way that is suitable to your needs and the needs of your clients, and you can use Office 365 for this purpose. Let me just click through some of these things. Okay, so let me see how it potentially might work. Now we still have 15 minutes to go, which is manageable. You have seen this screen. Łukasz has told you in detail about it. Now I can't see it. Okay, so we have this full screen view. The first element that I would like to point out, don't look at this new presentation, but look at the links at the top. That is what we publish and where we publish from. This is a demo WEBCON presentation that is available in our servers in a scenario whereby the domain is completely separate. So this is not our local network. This is an additional BPS portal. So the first thing you do, you publish a BPS portal. You do not publish a SharePoint. You make your BPS available. Now the second thing, so these are the elements of the same portal, but they are available in the SharePoint com. So this is Office 365 with our BPS portal. This is a demo domain. So this is WEBCON BPS SharePoint.com. So this is the instance of Office 365 featuring our demo installation. But I can switch to WEBCON Zoo intranet, and the same Office 365 has different colors, but the link is the same. Should feature our BPS portal, which comes from our intranet. You can see how many tasks I still have to do, which is quite a lot, as you can see. The same Office 365 may be used to display web parts from different systems, and this might be from systems which I use very often, and there are only few tasks to be done, and also tasks from my local intranet, and as you can see, there are lots of tasks to be done here. Well, the first thing, however, is that you have to publish it. You have to adopt suitable technical methods. This has been integrated with Azure Active Directory. This is our default system here. Now, applications are made available with multi-tenant solutions. Now, you may want to use this one actually because it's useful. It's very good. Łukasz told you a little bit about embed codes, and I can tell you a little bit more about where to get these embed codes from. Imagine that you want to embed a part of your code not as a web part. You can copy an application in the system with the code called element to be embedded. You can choose mode. This might be application view, and then you choose application. Say it might be purchase request, and this is the only thing you have to do. So you download a part of your embed code. You may embed it in any web system that accepts this kind of code. Now, there were some hopes that you can embed these codes and you don't have to use the SharePoint, that this works as proxy, but this doesn't work as proxy. Now, you have a full link to your on-premise server, and this embed code is embedded in the iframe in this server that you're using. So the first thing you're going to do is how you publish BPS in external sources, and then only then can you play with embed codes. Now let me switch to live. This is a portal of the Country Housewives Society in the village of Maszyce, which I support, and here's an embed code, and it shows you the size of the embed code. There's a question of how you should log in to this bit. Now, if you want to order any service in this particular environment, you have to do it to suit your needs, and you have to show that this actually works, that the reports can show that everything has been done and the authentication system is there. You don't have to publish the SharePoint. BPS can connect with your providers. The providers that you're using in this real scenario is that you work with the Gmail. But there's another process that my wife didn't let me to show. That is some of the tasks that you attribute to these housewives that belong to this association. But these tasks are absolutely confidential, so I'm not able to show you these. So we don't live far away from the city, but our housewives told us that they don't want any Gmail. So they used the local Active Directory, and these accounts have been created with a process. Now, as I'm speaking about this, these web parts were embedded not only in the site of my village, but also in the websites of other villages nearby. And this all concerns the sewage system in our local village, and working with those companies who serve the sewage system. We're talking about embed codes. We can embed an entire portal. We can embed an application. So we can start the process. You can create a report, you can create a dashboard, you can create a task meter or start buttons. So these things you can embed with your embed code. Speaking of new things, well, the local Active Directory is nothing new, but as you are going to create your scenarios, think about integrating Azure Active Directory. It's easy to integrate it. Obviously, you have to register it with Azure Active Directory. You have to download your client ID, but that's all you have to do actually. You can also add a possibility to synchronize the users from a standard configured provider such as LDAP. This might be configured in a variety of ways. The security measures are very different. And finally, there is also you can also use any authentication provider that is configured with the SharePoint. The SharePoint has a powerful mechanism to authenticate the providers of these applications, but this is possible. And these authentication providers may be used in Designer Studio. You have to provide your client ID, your client secret, and then you start working with Azure Directory. It's worth thinking about this, even if you log in with your local ID. Now, if you have a hybrid system, and if you have transferred your local Active Directory accounts to Office 365, now this Azure Directory gives you really simple solutions, and it's really worth thinking about this as you migrate to Office 365 or as you integrate your system with Office 365. And the last element that I would like to tell you a little bit about, from the security reasons, this is very important, that is authorization, that is the way you grant access to the system. The fact that you authenticate the user, that is, you know that Paweł Jawień with a Gmail account is really Paweł Jawień. Now what you need to do, you need to grant privileges to Paweł Jawień. External users, either Gmail users or ADFS, may not be added to the local Active Directory. This is impossible. So you lose this particular feature. You don't have any SharePoint features. You could add external users to SharePoint groups. Now, BPS groups, they are going to be there in the system as soon as possible. That's my answer. When? We're going to do it as quickly as possible. Well, my experience suggests that B2B scenarios are more of a B2C scenario. We would suggest that you create a simple process to manage privileges and access to these privileges. It doesn't matter whether you're going to use Active Directory groups or SharePoint groups, but you're going to manage your users with processes, and you can disable these users with these processes. You may not disable accounts or the external accounts with these solutions, but you can at least disable access that has been granted to these users. Now, these external users must be added to the list of users in BPS. This was already available in 2017. This is done with a process. This may be automated. This may be done with action. And finally, auditing. The most important thing is at the very end. If it makes sense to carry out an audit, it must be done in regular intervals, and we must do it continuously. Now, one-off audits make no sense. Most of the time, this is just a waste of time and money. And that's because if you do an audit for rapid change technology, it is valid only for the existing configuration, that is Microsoft Windows, SQL. If you add change to any of these systems, this has a bearing on WEBCON BPS, and this also simply means that the audit has been carried out for this particular configuration of WEBCON BPS. Audits obviously cost money, but they make sense. The platform as such is also important. We know that Microsoft releases security corrections every single Tuesday. If some companies are too keen or too crazy about the security, they do audits every Tuesday. And the same goes for processes. If you have added a new process, you have to audit the installation. If you have changed the process, you have to audit the processes. So this is something that should be in BPS as a process that starts subsequent audits. And this is my mantra. I'm going to reiterate this. This is something that you have to audit in a continuous manner. If you start creating B2B processes, you have to monitor who you grant access to your system. So we've just run out of time. If there are any questions, I'm here, I'm available. During the conference, I'm available at WEBCON. If you have any questions, we may just, and if you don't have any questions now, we may